Reconstructing philosophy. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Reconstructing Philosophy podcast. I'm back. I pop up every now and again to interview people where I can, and I'm back on a new channel. Maybe some people might have been wondering what happened, but I actually got locked out of my old channel, so it's good that I'm back on a new channel and I'm able to upload new content now that I have some time. I can happily report, before I get into discussing my guest for this episode, that Ian MacDonald and I have come out with a book. Yes, that's true. If you like hearing our insights but don't like hearing the sound of our voice, you can now buy our book on the ethics of AI. So the book is entitled An Inquirer's Guide to Ethics in AI, and it comes out from Broadview Press, and you should be able to hopefully buy it from fine bookstores everywhere. But keep a lookout for it. We worked very hard on it. I've been told it seamlessly blends moral philosophy, philosophy of science, and technology. We cover a lot of really interesting issues ranging from opacity and bias to the moral responsibility of scientists to the way people interact with algorithms and whether we should be using algorithms to recreate dead people. The book is packed with many, many details, so have a look. In other news, I'm also the founder of the Ethics of AI Society of Waterloo, and occasionally we meet and we like to put on symposiums discussing topics in the ethics of AI where we can. And we had our first symposium back in March, I believe, of this year. And this time we were able to come back bigger and badder than ever with a 2-day symposium with a bigger and badder budget. And we were able to have a keynote address from Dr. Maura Grossman, who is going to be my guest today in the form of the keynote fireside chat that her and I engaged in. So Dr. Maura Grossman is a prominent researcher and practitioner in the field of law and computer science. She's widely recognized for her pioneering work on electronic discovery and technology-assisted review. She is a research professor at the University of Waterloo and an adjunct professor at the Osgoode Hall Law School. So she does a lot of work bridging the gap between technology and practice. And I had the good fortune of having her join me for this fireside keynote chat. So we used an owl to film this event, and sometimes it seemed to know where we were, sometimes it didn't. So the video quality isn't always great, but at least hopefully it is understandable. So this fireside keynote took the form of an interview between me and Maura, where the questions were submitted by members of the Ethics of AI Society relating to Maura's research in law and the application of artificial intelligence. So if you didn't have a chance to join us at our symposium, which took place on November 21st and 22nd, you'll now have the chance to hear our interview here in the form of a podcast. So I will let her take it away.
So many people have been looking into generative AI and hopes that it will make it easier for the average person to understand the law better and to help them navigate an often very complex legal system. Do you think that generative AI has the potential to do that?
Yes, I absolutely do. We've already started to see some courts experiment with chatbots to help people navigate the system because the system is incredibly Byzantine and complex. And I'll tell you, even myself, trying to get permanent residency here, I'm a lawyer and I have a PhD, and my application was rejected 8 months, for missing signature on this line or whatever, and the legal system is like that. It's very, if you're in the civic comma somewhere or whatever, that it gets rejected. And so I do think generative AI has a role to play here and will be helpful in offering people information and having. I was recently at a hotel and I called down on the customer service line and it was answered by a bot and it said, "What are you calling for?" And I said, "Late checkout," and it said, "Oh, late checkout. Our normal checkout is 12. You want a club. If you want more than that, you have to speak to the front desk." And I was like, "Oh, this would be cool." And I could see then in the having like the clerk that you could call to say, when does this have to be filed or what has to be attached and getting quick answers. Then, lots of us are always pressing the 0, hoping to get the U in. But I think for certain basic questions, I think.
So along the same lines, do you think that the use of AI in legal processes will help or hinder access to justice for various marginalized communities? And what safeguards do you think are necessary to ensure equitable outcomes?
So right now, the number of people who need legal services who cannot get them is extraordinary. I've heard numbers like 80%. Maybe it's higher than that. I don't know. Lots of people, first, they don't know whether they have a claim or not, because in order to know whether you actually have a lawsuit, you have to speak to a lawyer. And even if they do, they can't afford to pay this person to help them. And unless it's worth billions of dollars, nobody's going to take it on Kitsat or something like that. So I do think that AI has great potential to help people in drafting and in figuring out whether they have claims. It won't be perfect. The tools hallucinate, et cetera. We know that. But tremendous help. What I worry about is a two-tiered system. So it's very different than, say, going to the dentist. You go to the dentist, and you think it's great the daughter. I don't want to say anybody, because some of them hurt more than others and stuff like that, but it does require like a legal gentleman. I do think laws is different. A better lawyer really does help than a non-qualified lawyer. It really makes a difference in terms of the creativity of the arguments people come up with, who they know, their connections, all kinds of stuff. So I don't want to see two tiers of law, those who can afford, good, sophisticated, fancy law, and those people who can't. But I still think that having these systems that can help people who have nothing, with no chance of getting into court, that can be helpful. The other place where I see this is in very low-value legal disputes. So I bought a pair of earrings from China. And one of them came and the ghost was broken. It was bent. And so I contacted the vendor and I said, one of the posts is damaged. I really love the earrings. Could you just send me a replacement for the broken one? Here's a picture of the broken one. And I think there was a language battle, but I got back an answer that essentially said, if you weren't such a moron, you could just bend it and fix it. And so I asked my husband, and he said, no, if I touch that, the torque goes up. It's so bent that it's going to break right. So I said, oh, you try. Okay, it didn't work. And so I had to go to online dispute resolution. They had a AI dispute resolution. The house on site, it was $12 just buy another pair of earrings. No. Got to do this. The lawyer had to do this. And I make my case, and he put my photographs and said, the guy said he won't even consider refunding unless I send the 2 earrings back. If I send the 2 earrings back, it's going to cost me more than the $12 or $13 that the earrings cost in the first place. So I won. I got $1.38 back. The bot assumed that because I had one earring that was still good, I had changed some value. And as you notice, I sometimes wear 2 different earrings now. They cut it up and get used at your 1 earring. But it was quick justice. It was efficient, and often if you can't get into a court, you can't get a day off from work, you can't get child care, you can't get justice in law. So maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was something. And I do think that we'll see AI start for low-value matters. Now, that doesn't mean it's the right thing for child custody, criminal cases, things like that. But for low-value stuff where people just really couldn't get into court, of a landlord-tenant dispute over a month's rent, I could see AI stepping into these areas. So I'm hopeful. We have a ways to go to make them better, but I am very hopeful that this will allow people access to the justice system and access.
So, again, in line with these issues related to how AI can marginalize communities, obviously the issue of bias is a big issue in AI, right? So, if we can't eliminate bias and discrimination in algorithms, should there be some kind of prohibition on the use of them, especially for things like predictive policing, for facial recognition by law enforcement, or for the use of AI by use of judges to determine recidivism potential or sentencing?
So these tools trouble me. The thing we don't know, and the research we haven't done, is are they more biased or less biased than the judges who are out there? And who've done that research. So I would feel very differently if they have bias, they have less bias, but we don't know that. I am very uncomfortable for use of these tools like Compass, which makes sentencing decisions, where it has been shown that when it makes false positive errors and it says somebody is likely to be a recidivist or to be a repeat offender when they're not, twice as often that's a person of color. And when it says they are not going to be an offender and to let them free, give them a lesser sentence, twice as often that's a white person. That had promised me they don't think we should be using tools that do that, or where it's very clear that the facial recognition algorithms work well for white men and don't work well for black women, and that of the 5 or 6 errors that have been made with these tools, all of them have been made false arrests have been people of color. So I'm very, very troubled by that. But before I would completely ban these things, I want to do the research that told us, are they worse or better, and in what circumstances? I still worry about even using them just as a separate piece of information, because it sort of anchors you. And sort of you see that at that score, and it's very hard to get away from that score, especially if you think in the United States, a lot of state judges are elected. So you're up for election next year. You got this criminal on trial here. The tool says they're 8. Maybe your gut tells them you let them go for now. But you think I'm up for election next year. If I'm wrong and they commit a crime, I'm really in trouble, but get really bad press. So I might as well just lock them up, because nobody's going to criticize me for that decision because it agrees with the algorithm. And I think that colors you if those kind of biases get in the way. So I'm not sure I would go as far as to say we shout all of these things, but I think we ought to be really to use them when know that they have racial bias.
It's really interesting because, this, you can also imagine there's a kind of corporate sales tactic, right, where they say, well, don't use this to the nature decision, just use it as a data point.
Right.
But, that can be problematic. So, again, in line with issues related to human oversight in the legal system, right? So what role should human oversight play then in AI-driven legal decisions? And should there be ethical or legal limits on delegating certain kind of decision-making powers to artificial intelligence? And also, how can the legal system maintain the sort of required public trust while implementing these technologies?
So other than this very minor, low-value disputes that we could probably all agree what's the big deal? We're talking about $200 one way or the other. I don't think these decisions should be put in the hands purely of what are the decision-making systems. The Constitution of the U.S., a charter, puts the sort of right and privilege to make decisions about other people's freedom in the hands of judges, not in the hands of AI outlets. And I think there needs to be human oversight, and more than just oversight. I'm very mixed and ambivalent on the judges' use of these things. I don't have a problem if they want to use it to summarize a long case or something like that. But to sort of outsource your thinking, you'd say to an algorithm, what do you think should happen here? Here are the facts. I don't think so, because these tools, they don't have compassion, they don't have an empathy. They're trained to be probabilistic, not to be nuanced and to take into account, the very particular circumstances in front of us. So I don't think they should be handed over. If they aren't handed over, I think there has to be an appeal mechanism. I think people should have an ability to opt out. And you need very close monitoring of these tools over time to make sure the models aren't drifting into ways. I think if there's not some transparency, then you aren't going to have public trust. People don't know how something is reaching its conclusion, coming up with the decision that you should get 3 years in jail instead of 6 years in jail. And I think what makes our justice system work is that the public, by and large, trusts that it's fair and so forth. And if you don't have any explanation, that's a problem. The challenge is often the more transparent you make AI tools, the less well they operate predictably. So I can use a decision tree very straightforward to see yes, no, exactly where the decision came from, but that's not going to be as good as deep learning. The deep learning is going to be completely opaque. So do I want it to be more accurate and crunch more data? Do I want it to be more transparent and less accurate? And I think we need lots of stakeholders making those decisions, particularly the people who are going to be the most impacted by it. And it's really interesting. When I ask my classes, I ask them to vote. I say they can vote on. They're in front of a judge. They have choice between a human judge and an AI judge. And I ask them to vote which way they'd like to go. The white men vote for the AI, and everybody else votes for you. Because the white men figure, I'm going to get a fair shake in front of the AI, who knows with the human, and everybody else feels exactly the opposite.
I can tell you either way, I wouldn't trust it. So, so this next question is a bit more lengthier and a bit more specific to the American book complex, right? So the Confrontation Clause of the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution provides that all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to be confronted with the witnesses against them. The right only applies to criminal prosecutions, not to civil cases or proceedings. And generally the right is to have a face-to-face confrontation with any witness who is offering testimonial evidence against the accused in form of cross-examination during trial. So what should the standard be governing transparency, interpretability, and explainability of algorithms if they're going to be used as evidence against a witness in a trial or in a criminal trial?
So I've argued against I don't think it's helpful to anthropomorphize the algorithms and say they are elites or they are an expert. They're not. They're a bunch of mathematical functions computing something. So I don't quite agree with saying you can cross-examine the algorithm, because you can't cross-examine the algorithm. But say we're using this as an analogy and somebody wants to use algorithmic data against you, I think either two choices. either you have to be able to explain it, how it got to its answer, why, what it is, what inputs led to the outputs, or you have to have scientific evidence, empirical evidence, that the tool is valid and reliable. So there are lots of medications we will take that nobody can tell you how it works, the mechanism in the body. Not even sure how aspirin works entirely. But we take them because an FDA or the equivalent has tested them and has determined that they're safe and effective. So either the tool has to be independently, not the person selling, which was part of the problem of Compass and so on. It's other recidivism tools whom the people who test them, who the people who are selling them. And the independent person has tested it and found that it's valid, meaning it does what it's supposed to do. It measures or predicts what it's supposed to, and that it's reliable just so consistently under similar circumstances. That's okay if there's lots of peer review and everybody in the industry agrees that this is an effective tool at measuring whatever it is, blood splatter or whatever, and we're all comfortable that this is, effective, accurate, reliable evidence. Sure, then I'm not sure somebody needs to understand the exact mechanism of how it worked. But otherwise, if you can't do that, then you have to explain it, how it worked. But it's very interesting in the United States. The Rules Committee about a week or two ago for evidence has now put in a proposal for a new rule that says if this evidence being used against somebody is the same kind of evidence that a human expert normally would have testified about, then not that the algorithm becomes an expert or something like that, but the algorithm needs to meet the same characteristics that the expert would. So they need to have if it needs to have a proper qualifications, it needs to show it was valid and reliable and used a proper methodology, whatever. So they're according the characteristics of the things you would require of an expert testimony into machine-generated testimony.
Could you volunteer that?
In what sense?
And leave the algorithm.
Well, you wouldn't be able to question the algorithm. You might be able to bring in the developer of the algorithm and ask them questions about it. How did they get to this answer or whatever? And so I think ultimately that's going to lead to the rejection of more of this evidence than before, because a lot of it's not going to be able to pass this because either the developers are going to say that's proprietary, I can't explain that, or they're going to say it's deep learning that I have no idea how it gets to the answer, or we didn't get this independent validation. So I think the intent is to block some of this evidence until there's more scientific proof that it's actually valid.
So again, in line with the idea of using AI evidence in court, right? So there are many potential ways that AI could be used as evidence of court. So can you talk about what some other kind of examples where someone might use AI evidence in court? And are there any legal applications where, obviously we have reason to be skeptical in a lot of cases, right? But are there any cases where we should welcome these AI-generated content is being used as evidence in court? And if so, what concerns does this raise, and what kind of guardrails should be in place?
Sure. There are two situations where AI can come into court. One is where we all acknowledge it's AI. So you were fired as professor at Waterloo because where we started to use some valuation tool, AI tool that monitors how often your mouse is moved and the websites you go to and your efficiency and all kinds of other stuff. And you score at the lowest quartile or something like that. And you say, I was discriminated against for whatever reason, or I don't think this is valid, and now we're in court. and we're having the dispute over whether this was a proper way to evaluate you, etc. There, we treat the AI evidence no different than let's better evidence or any other scientific and technical evidence. And the test is more or less, is it accepted in the field? Is it peer reviewed? Does it have standard operating procedures? What's its error rate? This kind of stuff. The next place it can come in is, and this happened in case in Washington State of the United States, there was a murder, and there was a eyewitness who captured something on their cell phone, and the video was fuzzy. So the defense had a video expert come in and unfuzz or clean up the video. And it looks more like a cell phone is being pulled out of the pocket than it got in the fixed up anything. The government says, wait a second, you used AI to clean up that video. You can't explain what the AI did, how it concluded it looked more like a phone than a gun. And they challenged the evidence, and the court eventually said, this is some kind of machine learning. The person who used it couldn't explain how it worked. It's not accepted in the forensic community, maybe accepted it aesthetically in the artistic community, but it's not a scientific tool, and I'm not letting this. I think those should be easier cases, if you will. The harder case is this recorded the field, leaving me a voicemail. And you say, I didn't leave. Oh, that's on me. I didn't leave it. And I say, yes, you did. I've heard your voice a million times. In fact, for 10 years. That's you. And there you are in the same exact voice, saying, no, it's not me. And now we have a problem, because if we're going to bring in experts, that's going to increase the cost and delay this litigation. And that's very expensive process to start digging into that data. It's very complex when you're in a family court and somebody cuts in with their phone and says, my husband's threatening me, threatened to lock me and the kids in the trunk and to drag the car into the lake. I want the kids taken away immediately. I want full custody. I want a protective border that can come within 100 feet of any of us. And here's my phone and I'll flake the take. And how on earth is that judge supposed to know what to do in that situation? Are they supposed to take the phone and start looking at the metadata and try to figure it out? And they have to make a decision, so they're going to make the more conservative decision, which is to impose the protective order, all of that. And that has implications. That has implications for that other person. And some people might say, well, it's only 3 or 4 weeks that they can't see their kids. But now they've got a hurdle of something they've got to prove is not that. And it's very difficult to prove. So I think the harder situation, but the one that keeps me up at night and that I've been writing about for the last 3 or 4 years, is this deepfake. And I think now, with anybody's ability to go onto the internet, get up a computer, and internet access, you go to a free site, you already have more than enough of my voice to make a very compelling you still picture me right off the internet and make it into a video. And this is wreak havoc. This is absolutely the wreak havoc in the justice system, let alone democracy and everything else. But it really is going to be very, very problematic for courts and for jurors.
For that, our next question was along the lines of this, right? So given the capacity for generative AI to do fake evidence, and given the arms race dynamic between people who are trying to create better generative AI generators and people who are trying to create AI that can detect those generative AI, right? And so given that these things, these detectors, these AI-generated detectors can also produce false positives, what should our strategy be for handling the problem of AI-generated evidence? Is this something that is going to evolve technical solutions like coming up with better AI detectors, or is going to evolve or change the way the courts handle and evaluate evidence?
So I think we need at least a 3 or 4-pronged approach. And I've been advocating to courts, both in the United States and Canada, that they need to reassess the evidence rules. Because right now, the way the rules work is the bar to get evidence in is very, very low. And then it's up to either the judge or the jury to decide how much weight to get it. So unless you can, it's really a piece of junk. It cuts it. And that doesn't work in this day and age of AI evidence where it sounds like you, I say it's you, I read 2 other people who say it's you, and it comes in. Yet the problem is when it's audio or video, you are 650% more likely to remember it and to take it seriously than if it was just something I read you. It has a phenomenal imprint on perception and memory. So in Delia's experiments, where a bunch of people like you will come into a room and you all play cards, and everything will be fine, no problems, and then we'll split the room, and we put half of you in one room and half in the other, and this part, somebody says, Matt cheated, and how many of you saw it? Didn't see Matt cheat. Anybody prepared to sign an affidavit saying Matt cheated? No. We show the other room a deepfake where Matt pulls a card out of his sleeve. And they say, how many of you saw Matt cheating in the other room? And half the people raised their hand to say they saw it. And half of them are willing to sign an affidavit swearing, but they saw it, but they didn't see it. They saw the video, and the video changed their perception and memory. So half of you in this room, 40% of you, if I showed you a picture of yourself as a child on the Viking ship, would have a memory of being on a Viking ship with your parents, whatever, even learning that. It's something about seeing is believing. So I think the rules of evidence need to take some of that back from the jury and have the judges do a little more gatekeeping to first determine how likely is it that this stuff is realistic. I agree with the premise in question that this war between the detectors and the generators is a real problem. I'm hoping at some point things like C2PA and other standards of provenance will come into play so that every single phone, computer will mark indelibly anything you create from the day of inception with some kind of marker that cannot be removed that will record every change. Before we get there, where everybody replaces their phone and things like that, that's going to be years. I think the media will move to that very quickly because they're very incentivized to be able to show people that their pictures are true. So I'm hopeful that there will be some tech help there. And then really the only question will be the few percent where it doesn't have that kind of block. And then I think we need public education. I think people need to understand better that you can't just, we used to think, and if you read it on the web or whatever, it's got to be true. Well, it's not true. That can be more, if not more. And so we have to become more skeptical, but we don't want to become too skeptical. I heard this new term like a day ago called reality apathy, where people become so apathetic and so cynical they just don't believe anything anymore. And we saw back at Hurricane Helene, where people saw that cute picture of the little girl with the bow, with the puppy, and crying, and then people learned that was fake. And all of a sudden, they don't want to make money anymore because they feel like they're in a scam. So people are unwilling to help other people completely and get that cynicism. So we need people to become more skeptical, but not so skeptical that they just stop even relying on trying to figure out what's real.
They'll come take credit.
Yeah. So I think it's a multi-front approach. I don't think any one alone is going to do it.
So what do you think, again, one more question about deepfakes for one. So what do you think are one of the best ways to legally deter a deepfake, right? So particularly when the creator might have a malicious intent. So should this count legally as defamation or something similar?
We can't stop this. There's more to this up. When signature requires a little bit of talent, actually, if you're not going to want to forge your signature on a check, and that's actually low quality for those court basics. Today, anybody can go on for free. I've done this with my own voice, say tapes and stuff for talks I get. I made videos out of friends, took still pictures and made it to videos. Anybody could do this. So we cannot deter it, and particularly can't deter it because if you're not in Canada, I can't go after you anyway, when they can go after you in Saudi Arabia. I mean, how are you going to do this? The legislators have only started thinking about deepfakes in two areas, imagery. Non-consensual imagery. You've started to see some laws against that. And they started with the real imagery, but now they're moving into application. And if you generate it with AI, it still counts. The second area you've seen a little bit of movement is in political figures in elections, and within very close proximity to an election, you can't manipulate. In the U.S. at least, some of those have been challenged as a violation of free speech. And so I don't know if those will prevail or not, basic boss. There's been very little in general, after like movie stars to be able to preserve their likeness and stuff like that. But there's almost no protection for the rest of us. And I don't see that coming. The law right now is not really set up for deepfakes. Yes, if you have me saying something that's really hurtful and I suffer some kind of damages, I can sue you, but I have to be able to show what actually suffered damages. Otherwise, I can't. Yeah, I can go for an injunction, try to stop you for doing it, but once it's on the internet, you'll now have arguments against it. So I don't really see a great cure for this. I hate to be a fatalist, but I don't really see a good way to control this stuff unless there are tools that the average person can use to run this, media to really get a reliable answer about whether it's real or not. I'm very careful, even with my students. There are times where I'm virtually certain it's used a large language model to submit something, but the tools are not reliable enough that you cannot bring under Rule 71 or something like that, because you can't prove that they did when they said it happened. But, unless, of course, it's got a fake citation or something like that. But, some particular paper that's got all these bullets with all the headaches, and it's so clear. Then it, those, a lot of the students, there's no action ready by it. But there's a way to prove it, or to what.
And then, just like with the courts, the AI detectors for students, there's a paper in this, or a news article about this recently. There's 2%, apparently 2% false positive rate for AI checkers for instructors. So it means 2% of your students you might be accusing falsely.
And more often than not, they're not native English speakers. So it's got a racial and cultural component to it, because the language structure, non-native English speakers, it more resembles that predictable sort of simple or use of language. And so you end up going after marginalized communities where you don't necessarily.
So you've spoken a lot about responsible AI. So what do you mean when you refer to the idea of responsible AI, and what are some best practices or good policies for achieving responsible AI?
So I think that if you look at all of the guidelines on what is trustworthy AI, what is responsible AI, I think there's a pretty good consensus on what most people think that means. So most people think that means the AI is accurate. They say accurate. I prefer valid and reliable because I think accurate is a vague term. A broken watch is accurate twice a day. So I like believing a lie believe better, but it's accurate. It's unbiased and fair. It's safe, secure, and privacy protecting. So there's some robustness to it. It's reasonably transparent and explainable. Accountability, somebody is responsible for it. And then I think in many applications you need informed consent, that the person used data or on whom the tool is being used has given their permission and is aware. The problem is how the possible attack all of these things. I think they are in tension with each other right now. And so the more fair we make an algorithm, so say we even out, make false negatives the same for both of you, it becomes less accurate. The tighter the fairness constraint, we decrease the accuracy of the algorithm. The more transparent and explainable we make it, we decrease the accuracy. One of the best ways to make algorithms fairer is to actually collect all these sensitive variables. So if I know you are a person of color, and so I can take two resumes that are exact same resume, and I put Jamal's name on one and John's name on the other, and I run them both through the algorithm, and if John gets an interview with Jamal Vesant, I know that there's some kind of racial bias going on in terms of the name. But collecting that private data invades people's privacy. And so the best way to audit algorithms is to have lots of this private data so that you can audit for bias. But having all of that data goes into privacy risks. So I think fairness and privacy are in tension with each other. So I think that's an issue we don't talk about enough. Everybody talks about responsible AI as if we can actually have it today, but we can't. And we don't talk about those trade-offs enough. When I teach my class, and I say to my students, I want you to build workflow that's fair. And then I ask them to define fair. Half of them say fair means everybody should be treated equally. But half of them say, no, not everybody should be treated equally. Like, we should make up for past discrepancies, so people should get what they need. So if somebody has two legs and somebody else has one leg, the person with one leg should start the race further down the track. We can build an algorithm that does both. That is, treats people equal and makes up for discrepancies. So when some boss at Triple says, be sure the algorithm is fair, and there's no discussion of what fair means, who the heck knows what that issue is? And this is the more often hateful. So I think we need to have discussions about these trade-offs. We have to have consensus definition about what we view about these things. And we need stakeholders involved who can be impacted by these decisions and discussions. To maximize the number of diversity of the teams that we have. And so there are things we can do, but I don't think right now we can. This responsibility.
It's great. Yes, it's my just co-wrote book on ethics of AI. I'm so happy to know after talking with you that we included all of these issues in that chapter. So I'm happy to know that we're no slouch on that topic. Great. Okay, well, that was great talk. Some really fascinating answers there. Maybe I think we move to the Q&A, right? So I think I'll just open it up to questions.
And so that was my interview with Maura Grossman and her keynote fireside chat as part of our Ethics of AI Symposium held at the University of Waterloo on November 21st. I want to thank Maura again for participating as part of that symposium and for agreeing to allow me to reproduce this interview in the form of a podcast. And I want to thank all of you for joining me today. And so just a reminder that Ian McDonald and I have written a new book entitled An Inquirer's Guide to Ethics in AI from Broadview Press. So if you have any interest in that topic or many of the topics that Maura and I were talking about in our chat, feel free to have a look out for that book. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, I want to thank all of you for joining me again today. This has been another episode of the Reconstructing Philosophy podcast. All right, bye-bye.